Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the 20 Survival Guide podcast. This is obviously your host, Emily. It's just me here today. I wanted to speak to you guys about the topic quite close to my heart, and I haven't really spoken about it with a lot of people, and if you're not really close with me, you wouldn't know this. People should know my younger sister has a disability. She has a physical disability. She was born premature. So she was born in August, but she was supposed to be born in November. So if you think about that, that's 25 weeks premature. And what's even scarier is I think that's the same time as like the cutoff between if you're allowed an abortion or not, that you're barely even developed to that point. That is wild. The whole right side of her body is paralyzed. When I say paralyzed, I don't mean in this case, we were so lucky that it wasn't wheelchair bound paralyzing. So yes, she can still use her right arm and her right leg. Yes, she can still walk. Yes, she can still write, but not the same. She's not physically unable to use them, but using that is not the same ability as her left side. Everything is much harder for her, and she struggles a lot. When she walks, you can see that she struggles with her right side a lot more. And when she was born in August, she actually came home from the hospital 4 days before Christmas. That's 5 months in the hospital after she was born, before she was even able to come home. She had to be under urgent care to keep her alive. At this point, I was already born, and I was at home jumping about, waiting for my mum to come home, and I barely saw her because she would spend her nights in the hospital with my sister and my dad too, pretty much. I probably didn't notice it as much as I would now. In my early ages, I was pretty much not spending much time with my parents because they were busy. They were busy with my sister. And this is not, just to clarify, this is not a woe is me podcast episode. Oh, it's so hard for me, because I could never imagine how much of a struggle it is that she has to go through. We who are able-bodied will never be able to imagine that. That is heart-shattering to me. Being a sibling of a child who has a disability is also quite difficult. And I think that is what's not spoken about enough, because those siblings take on quite a burden. They feel extra pressure from the family, from yourself, from them, that just you automatically feel, and you can't help feeling that. You can't help overthinking things like that. Back to my sister. When she came home from the hospital, we knew that our life as a family was not going to be the same. It wasn't going to be that easy. It was going to be a strain on the family. It was going to be really tough. And obviously, she needed extra support throughout her whole life. So let's say she is putting a necklace on, for example. She can't physically put the clasp on because she can't use her two hands the same, because she can't use her right hand. So all these little things which you can do independently as an able-bodied person, she can't do, which we all take for granted. Like, that's so easy. We just don't even think that we're doing it because it's so normal. But that's so difficult for someone who's not able-bodied. She walked much later than everyone else. She talked much later than everyone else. And when she grew up, she had to be told that she would be a year behind the rest of her peers in school, and that affects how you interact with friends your age, because once you grow up you really start to see the differences. So that's actually really tough. But there's a social pressure as well, that you don't want to feel different when you grow up, and you're like, I want to fit in whether you're able-bodied or not. Obviously now we all want to be different, but when we're in school, you really just want to fit in. And when you have a disability, it's 10 times harder to fit in because you physically can't hide that, and everyone knows it. I've had this many times where I look at sisters who are close in age and you think, oh, look, they talk about boy troubles, they talk about everything that they talk about with your friends, and they're so close. And I'm like, those situations do get to me. That's not, your sister isn't your friend first, it's your sister first. But I always used to look at those sisters and be like, oh, I wish I had that, I wish I had that kind of picture perfect sister relationship. So that was really tough, I'd say. And I think anyone who has a sibling with a disability can kind of relate to that for sure, because even if it's not a physical disability, if it's a mental disability such as autism or Tourette's or anything like that, it's quite difficult on the sibling because you compare yourself to other siblings and their relationships and you're like, oh, I wish I had that picture perfect relationship where I could really go to them for anything and like do everything with them, but that's just never going to be the case. And that's where patience comes in. You have to remember that you can't expect the same from someone who is not able-bodied as yourself. And I'm someone with very little patience in general, but those who also have siblings with disabilities can 100% relate to this. I'm sure that you really need patience because it comes with those things, like I said, my sister is slower. She's slower because she struggles 10 times more than we do to do all of these things. And you need to have that patience. You need to have that patience in when they're talking, when they make mistakes, when they irritate you. Those friends who don't have siblings with a disability, they don't quite understand what you go through at home. And when you have fights or when you have family issues and there's a family strain because, the child needs so much more support that it strains everyone else in the family to some extent. And that's not her fault. That's just how it is. Those friends who don't have those issues don't quite understand the struggle that the sibling has to go through. In my case, it's just me and my sister. I feel this extra weight and pressure to be exceptional in life, like to succeed to the utmost level, that in case my sister doesn't have the ability to get a proper job or stuff like that, that I can financially support her, for example. I would love to be able to do that if that's the case, because I want also then my parents to be able to retire so they don't feel like they have to be financially supporting her forever. Stuff like that is what I think about, and I'm sure siblings with disabilities think about. You also then think, I feel so bad because I don't understand what they're going through. And I was so lucky that I wasn't the person who had to go through that. I'm the able-bodied child. I was given so much opportunity. And then you almost feel like guilty that you're the lucky one. A prime example of this is I've just graduated uni and my sister's 2 years younger than me. So she should be going to uni, or she should have been in uni by now and finished first year, but she's not. And a lot of my friends who I've spoken to, so many, their parents have apparently decided to retire and they're going to the south of France in a camper van and saying, bye kids, fend for yourself. But I see my family and I see how hard my parents have worked and I see how they're just unable to do that right now because, they have to support her, they have to be there for her. That's the thing when you speak to your friends who don't understand these issues, because you know that it's just different. That's just something that you have to accept because it's no one's fault. It's not her fault. It's not my parents' fault. It's just sometimes how life goes. You don't always get things that are perfect. We can't all have a perfect life or the attention that is on the other sibling, on my sister, because of everything. And you as a sibling get very little attention compared to them. And that's obviously going to happen when she needs a lot more attention. But when you're younger, it makes a big difference because you kind of not get neglected in a sense, but you don't get that same attention and treatment. So it's really hard as a sibling. And I just think I really don't hear much about people talking about the sibling who have those sisters or brothers with disabilities, because yes, obviously it's nowhere near as difficult as what the child who has the disability is going through, but it's really tough in its own way and you kind of are going through it alone. Actually, you're definitely going through it alone. I honestly have gone through this whole journey of feeling this way alone because I barely know any other people who have siblings with disabilities. I know a lot of friends who have siblings with autism, and that is so tough. Basically, I've gone through feeling like this pretty much without anyone who I can really relate to. And that's because it's just not spoken about enough. So yes, my parents I can talk to about this, but they're parents, they're not siblings, so they don't get the same thing. I've kind of had to learn to deal with this by myself and speak to a couple therapists here and there and realize that it's okay, and learn some strategies that I can use to be a better sister, be more accommodating, be more patient for her. And honestly, this is one thing that I have learned from having a sibling with a disability, is that your problems get put into perspective when you see their problems and how much they have to deal with. Let's say you're like, oh, my friend cancelled on me and we were supposed to go on this bike ride, whatever. You know, I'm so annoyed, blah, 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 blah. She can't go bike riding. She'll never be able to go bike riding unless she's got, you know, training wheels. But that's a prime example of like, oh, well, you know, it's really not that big a deal. Like, it's fine. And at least I can go bike riding if I wanted to. Like, my problems at school, I'd think, oh, this person's being so mean to me, blah, blah, blah. Or like, I'm being teased at this when you're younger. And then you think, oh, imagine how much she's being teased, because kids are horrible. So if I'm being teased, I can't imagine what she is going through at school, what people are saying to her. And there's one thing that kids with disabilities really, really hate, and that is being treated differently. No one of them likes to be treated differently, because you're growing up and you want to be treated like an able-bodied person. You don't want to be felt sorry for. You don't want people asking you, oh, do you need extra help with this? No, you want to be like, I can do it, I'm fine. So it's so important to learn, whilst you might have to treat them differently in some ways, try your best not to single them out and make them feel like they're so different and you're treating them differently to everyone else. And I know that this is quite a deep episode, but I'm going to now start to say some amazing things about why having a sibling with a disability is honestly something that I would never trade in for anyone else, ever. So fast forward now. I'm 21 and she is 19. We thought she would probably have to be supported for the rest of her life. We didn't even know if she'd be able to get through school. She's finished school in an able-bodied school, so in a normal high school, and she's passed all of her exams. She's got an unconditional offer at a university, which she is starting in September, where we didn't even think she would get into university. That was so not on the cards, but she's proved us wrong again. She rides like I do, horses, which you can imagine is 10 times harder when you're not able-bodied, and we never thought she'd be able to ride. But she's not only riding, she's competing in para competitions and she's winning them. She won the nationals, so I haven't even won any nationals for any of my competitions with horses, to be honest with you. I don't know what I've been doing, but I clearly haven't been good enough to win any national competitions. And on top of all of that, she's actually learning how to drive, which we never thought she'd be able to do. In obviously a special car for disabled people with like special things for the wheel, but she's doing it. She's gonna learn how to drive and she's gonna be able to drive by herself, and she's not treated too differently because of that. So you don't think that that kid that's got a disability is really going to reach for the stars and do as many things as the able-bodied child. But when they grow up, they are faced with way more obstacles than you are. And then they have to overcome these obstacles with 10 times more power and force and mental strength. They're way more resilient. And my sister, as I said, always says to me, I don't want to be treated differently. So she's proved to us that she can do it all. She can still ride. She can still go to university. She can still pass her exams. She can still do all of those things. And honestly, with all of those obstacles which have made it 10 times harder to do that, she is literally my inspiration. She's someone who I look up to. She puts my life into perspective, because it's so easy to think that your problems are like so important when they're not, and then you have to think about other people. So she brings me back down to earth. She humbles me for sure. So then I think that makes me a nicer person, because I'm more well-rounded and I'm able to understand things, and I've been taught patience more than I ever thought I would have been. She looks up to me, and it's then my role to be a good role model, a good sister, someone who she wants to be like. So it's my job to set a good example for her, and I take pride in doing that. You guys who have siblings who have disabilities have something that's special. not more special, but special it's in its own way, you know? Like, you can really learn a lot from that sibling, so much, which then makes you just a softer human being, a nicer person, and you kind of don't sound so out of touch. And yes, it's difficult. Yes, you have to learn to be more patient and accommodate them way more. Everyone's siblings relationships are different. You can learn so much from your sister or your brother who's going through this. You have the opportunity to be there for them. And honestly, the nicest thing is seeing her grow up, and she surprises me all the time with what she can do and what she's capable of. And then I think, oh God, I if I'm struggling with this, I need to really work on myself. But the message of this episode is that if you're a sibling of someone with a disability, then I understand and I hear you, and I know it's really difficult. And I know that it's not spoken about enough. I know that other people don't understand, other siblings who don't go through this don't understand. But you have to firstly be easy on yourself, to remember that it is not your fault, and don't feel guilty, because there's nothing that's going to do apart from make you feel really badly. Speak to someone, speak to a therapist about it, because that honestly helped me a lot. I just kind of got to voice how I felt to people other than my parents, so that then I wasn't burdening my parents. On top of that, I could also voice myself to someone who was literally there to listen to me and who could understand to the best of their abilities. And also just look at your sibling and take inspiration from them, because they're special in a different way that we'll never be able to understand. Like I said, puts your life into perspective massively. And that's so important, because it makes you a nicer human being. You have this responsibility, and you honestly protect them with your whole life and everything you've got. And I wouldn't have it any other way. So yes, it's tough, but it's a blessing. It's a learning curve. They're going through way more than we are, so we can only be there for them. Quite a deep episode, but I just thought you guys should know that those who have a disability is obviously quite a sensitive topic. Some people even say that the word disability is kind of offensive and whatever, and I just think that's not, I don't agree with that, because I've spoken to my sister about this, and she says, why would people find that an offensive word? Like, yes, I do have a disability, and that's the truth. Like, why are we going to cover it up and say that it's something else which might sound a bit nicer? It's just rubbish, because if she's going to say that being someone who has a disability, then we shouldn't all be saying that's so offensive and whatever. Each to their own, you know, like this could bring up a whole can of worms, but this is just how I feel. I know that it's something that she has, and she can find a way to be proud of it, and she has to, because she lives with it. But she's an inspiration. She is the most special person in my life by far, and I wouldn't have it any other way. She is going to do some amazing things. I know that I'm not going to have to financially support her, because she's got so many talents. She's amazing. And honestly, I look up to her. So I think that you have to see it like that. She's so kind. She's so resilient. I've never seen anyone who gets back up and tries again after being beaten down so many times. It's great to have people like that in your life, because it reminds you of what problems are important and what problems you really can stop ranting about, because it doesn't even matter. That's the end of my story, and I'm going to go and do some horse riding, because that is such a me thing, such a little horse girl. I'm just going to go and gallivant in the fields. I don't know. I probably should have gone about half an hour ago to an hour ago, and I'm really late, so I'm going to go do that now. But I hope you guys have kind of seen this episode as a bit of a insight into disabilities, and a bit of an insight into those who have siblings with disabilities. And if you don't, then you can use this episode to understand those of your friends who do, and what they're going through, to try and be more sympathetic or try and understand. And if you have a sibling with a disability, then you can also relate to this, and that it's not that easy. Things need to change for those with disabilities in the world in terms of jobs and sports and everything. Disabilities are still not accommodated for enough, and they are not heard and seen enough. It's changing, but it's not enough, and we need to recognize that and shine a light on that, because there's so many people like my sister. We could all do a better job at trying to understand that. So yeah, that's the end of the episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed listening to me talk about something quite special and quite close to my heart. And honestly, if you got to this point, then thanks for just being patient and hearing my story, because I really appreciate it and it's not that easy to talk about. So I hope you guys all have a great rest of the week. I will see you next Wednesday. Bye.